Let me just start with sort of my favorite pet project. The shakeup in the White House briefing room and over at the White House Correspondents Association. It was huge what happened this weekend, and let me kind of walk you through what happened. So the White House Correspondents Association, which, as I've said before, has these limited rules about who can belong to it. They limit that. That's the one thing that you have to understand more than anything else. They choose who can belong and not. And then they exhibit all this power over who gets to go in the pool, or they used to anyway, and who sits where. And I'm going to get to all that. But you have to fundamentally understand that at the beginning, that they set the rules with respect to membership. So if you can't get in, you can't affect change, right? Anyway, because all these new independent journalists aren't part of the White House Correspondents Association, nor can they in a lot of cases because of the membership criteria. So what the White House is doing, Caroline Leavitt and the team over there, is so huge. But let me just back up for a second and explain this. So they have this annual dinner where you know that a bunch of D-list celebrities show up, and they all come under the guise of trying to promote the First Amendment or honor it or whatever. But basically, it's just a dinner where they make fun of Republicans and Donald Trump. And anyway, the president of the Correspondents Association is a guy named Eugene Daniels. I've talked about him before. He was with Politico. He just decamped over to MSNBC. But he hired this left-wing comedian. Her name was Amber Ruffin. And she was very clear. She did a tour with him, a media tour, where she said, basically, I don't like Trump. I'm going to skewer the guy. I'm going to do all this. But he didn't care because that's his view too, right? And he's now over at MSNBC. But Taylor Budowich, the deputy chief of staff that oversees communication, shared this clip over the weekend that I want to play for you, where she continues to be on this media tour talking about how she's going to handle herself at the dinner. Take a look.
Well, maybe you could do that for the White House Correspondents. Just change it up this year.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, God. Okay, so will anyone from the administration be attending? How much do you actually know about who will be in attendance? Do you get, like, the rundown?
I'm sure that I will at some point.
You will.
I know the news organizations that will be attending. I don't think the people confirm until quite a bit later. I don't necessarily, like, I'm not 100% interested in being like, ha, you're here, look at your stupid head, you're burned. I care, like, you're kind of a bunch of murderers. I mean, so, like, they were like, you need to be, equal and make sure that that you give it to both sides and blah, blah, blah. I was like, there's no way I'm going to be freaking doing that, dude. Under no circumstance.
Okay. All right. So I mean, you get the point. She doesn't want to be fair. She's going to go after Trump. She thinks they're murderers. That's people who support MAGA, murderers. And she has no intention of being fair. So they unanimously canceled her this weekend after she did this video claiming somehow they don't want to have a partisan comedian, which they chose. But here's the other part that they're not telling you. One, that video sparked it, right? Where she was clear that she had no intention of doing this, and they couldn't hide from it because she's now on video saying it. So at no point could they ever say, oh, well, we intended for this to be fair or whatever. No, it never was going to be. And then she doubled down on it. But here's the bigger point that I want you to understand. She's still going to get paid because she has a contract and she didn't technically do anything wrong, right? She's just expressing who she was, and she was the same person when they hired her. So if you go to this dinner as a Republican lawmaker or as a conservative or media outlet or correspondent or whatever, you are complicit. Do you understand that? They're still paying her. That money, those thousands of dollars that are get paid for a seat, they're paying her. You paid for her. If you buy a seat, and so for all these Republicans who, oh, well, it's not. Yes, it is. You are funding this. You're funding it. And I think this is unbelievable. Now, thankfully, the folks at Substack are doing a counter-programming dinner that night, a black tie dinner, honoring and celebrating independent media. I'm going to go to it. I think that'll be great. Let's celebrate independent media. Let's not make it one-sided. Let's have fun. I'm excited, and thankfully they're stepping up to the plate. You want to go to dinner with no comedian to sit with 3,000 people in the ballroom so you can take pictures of D-list celebrities? God bless you. But by the way, don't ever complain about the media again if you go to that dinner. If you go to that dinner, you're part of the problem. But it gets better because here's where they took it to a new level. Over the weekend, news leaked out that Caroline Leavitt and the White House press team are undoing the seating chart. Now, let me just walk you back on this. These 49 seats in the briefing room, 7 rows of 7. since at least 3 decades ago, the White House press office gave up. They said, I don't want to get into seating assignments. We're just going to let you, the White House Correspondents Association, do it. So they made the front row, the AP, the wires, the Washington Post, the NBCs, the big guys. And then they move it back. And as you see, when Caroline does briefings, and I did the same, if you don't get an assigned seat, you can sit on the sides. But, most of these press secretaries will call in the front row or two. They put their little name tag down on the bottom. Like, it's our seat. It's not your seat. It is a government room. It is taxpayer finance. These folks in the press don't own it. They have no right to these seats. The room is owned by taxpayers. It is unbelievable that they think that they get, because their existence in their little silly elitist exclusive club, that they get to determine who sits where. No. Now, there's rumors that they're going to put out a new seating chart. I think it should just be a free-for-all. You want to get there early? Get there early. You don't? You don't. Why should anyone get to save a seat because they're the Associated Press or NBC or the Washington Post? Go to open seating. That's how I would do it. I give them huge kudos. I put out a tweet yesterday celebrating this because they're finally showing that they're not in charge anymore. These other folks have a right to have a seat. Why did they not get to sit, even though they probably have a larger audience than a lot of these third-rate organizations? Unbelievable. By the way, you might remember in November, I put out a column in the Hill newspaper. And I sort of laid out advice for the incoming press secretary. And I kind of thought to myself, I wanted to go back and reread it yesterday. And it's interesting. I said, go beyond the front row. The front row of the briefing room consists of left-wing legacy media, ABC, NBC, CBS, Associated Press, CNN, New York Times, etc. Reestablish the importance of regional and local reporters that live and work in communities where voters actually live. Don't get caught up in the DC scene. You'll have tons of new friends and invitation to various events. Trump was right not to attend the White House Correspondents' Dinner. The White House Correspondents Association is an outdated left-wing organization. It's your briefing, not theirs. You set the rules, not them. Now, they might have probably going to do this anyway, but I'm just so glad to see it happen, and I'm excited that that's where this thing is headed. Over the weekend, for the first time, at least that I'm aware of, Susie Wiles, the incoming chief of staff, gave an interview and a tour to Laura Trump. I want to show you this. It's kind of cool. I mean, it just gives you some window into who she is as a person and how she operates. She showed off her office and talked about the meetings that they had there. Take a look.
Let's see what we got here. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Yeah, I don't know.
I pinch myself in the morning.
I ever came in here. Oh, and you have a beautiful fire?
Yeah, our fire days are probably dwindling because it's getting warm.
It came like this, or how did we do this office?
Actually, not. My predecessor, who was a wonderful guy, had a particular style, bought all his own furniture. So when I got here, it was empty. And so, while daunting, it allowed me to kind of...
You had to start from scratch
Yes,
here.
So I got to really put my own touch on it. I have a table that seats 8 because there are always 8 at it. And we start early and go till, late. A lot of the staff have young children. So we try to pack a lot into the middle of the day, and then I can always work before or after. So we try to accommodate that. But this is a place of really good meetings. The president's been down here once, which is more than he ever went down here in the past administration.
All right, that's great. I mean, it's so cool to see how she talks and operates because it's a window into how she's running this White House. They have these meetings. I love how accommodating it is. It's like, hey, we don't need to stay late just to do stuff. You have young kids, and let's get the work done. Anyway, I think it's a fascinating thing. Also, over the weekend, I don't know how about you guys spent your weekend. It's beautiful here in Northern Virginia. Beautiful. I mean, little overcast, but I thought this is a time to get out. I was doing some errands, running around. I attended a funeral of a good friend, Tony Dolan. I mentioned him on the show. And by the way, Vince Haley, the policy director at the White House, who was Tony's boss, gave this eulogy, my friends, that I have never heard a eulogy that well delivered, and a tribute to somebody the way that Vince Haley delivered for Tony Dolan. I joked with him afterwards. I said, Vince, if I start sending you stuff now, will you write my eulogy? That good. I hope to God that at some point I inspire enough people to think the way that people did of Tony Dolan, to allow a eulogy to deliver the way it is. But anyway, that being said, I couldn't help. There's a Tesla dealership about a mile down the road from me. And I saw that they were doing this day of action, this Tesla takedown day of action. This is how they're going to spend a beautiful Saturday in Northern Virginia. So I went down, and before I did, it was funny because I looked out and I saw, there were tweets. In fact, the Attorney General of Florida James Ottomeyer put out a tweet saying, hey, we're going to monitor this. Good for you guys. With all the violence that's happening, scratching cars, hurting people, violence at the Tesla dealerships, whatever. But I went down to actually see what was going down. Take a look. This is my video that I shot. Hey, good Saturday to you. It is 81 degrees in the border here between Arlington and Alexandria. Behind me, a Tesla dealership. This is how a bunch of area residents are choosing to spend their Saturday. Let's take a look.
Love the hat, man. Mine's coming.
Now, if you saw that, there's dudes flying Canadian flags. Some guy holding a big sign about Ukraine. What does Doge have to do with either? Canada, Ukraine? This is like the Star Wars bar scene. It's like, let's just go down and hang out with people that are probably like-minded. I mean, it was weird to watch this on a beautiful Saturday, to stand there holding signs that were all over the map. I mean, I will say this, at least they were peaceful, as the left likes to talk about protests, but it was unbelievable. All right, enough on that said. In other news, Robert F. Kennedy, who I have just given huge kudos to how he's done the job for all the worry about the left. Oh, he's going to come in and do all this stuff, really focusing on food safety. And also now trying to figure out why we're not, remember how we talked about education? We spend all this money. What are we getting? Test scores aren't going up. Kids aren't more educated, but we're throwing good money after bad. And he picked up on a really interesting theme over at HHS. Take a look at this video that RFK put out about how he's addressing some of the concerns about spending at HHS. Take a look.
Hey, everybody. I'd like to share with you a paradox that I've encountered here in Washington, D.C. as the new secretary of HHS. Our department is filled for the most part with competent, conscientious public servants, and yet the agency has been inefficient as a whole. Over the past 4 years during the Biden administration, HHS's budget increased by 38%, and its staffing increased by 17%, but all that money has failed to improve the health of Americans. In fact, the rate of chronic disease and cancer increased dramatically as our department has grown. Our lifespan has dropped, so Americans now live 6 years shorter than Europeans. We are the sickest nation in the world, and we have the highest rate of chronic disease. The U.S. ranks last among 40 developed nations in terms of health, but we spend 2 to 3 times more per capita than those nations. As secretary, I now understand why all this money is not improving our health. HHS is a sprawling bureaucracy that encompasses literally hundreds of departments, committees, and other offices. You know how bureaucracies work. Every time a new issue arises, they tack on another committee. This leads to tremendous waste and duplication, and worst of all, a loss of any unified sense of mission.
All right, you get the point there. We're spending money and we're not getting results. That's not a partisan thing. It's not a conservative thing. Well, it kind of is. But you should care as a taxpayer that we're just throwing money at bureaucrats and bureaucracy and not getting any result. We're not getting healthier. You heard the stat there. Our life expectancy is getting worse. Where's the demand? Education, healthcare. We're paying more and getting less. It should trouble everybody. But the blob, the swamp lives off this. More money, more grants, more programs, more bureaucracy. Too many people make too much money off of that. More people getting sick, living less, not having a good education. Because then they get to come up with a new contract or program. I just think it's so cool that across the board that we're actually addressing this stuff. All right, a lot more to get into. Before I get to, I mentioned my friend Tully Dolan. There was another passing that occurred that I want to take note of. Dick Carlson, who was is the father of Tucker Carlson, passed away last week. He led the Voice of America at a critical period. He died at 84 years old. And I want to show you how the Washington Post recognized his life. They put an obituary in. And I'm going to read you this. says, Mr. Carlson, father of conservative commentator Tucker Carlson, defended the VOA in the years before President Trump's order to dismantle the broadcaster. Dick Carlson, a former journalist who led the Voice of America under Republican administrations decades before the GOP was shaped by hard right commentators, including his son, Tucker Carlson, and President Trump, began a push to effectively silence the U.S.-funded broadcaster, died March 24th at his home in Boca Grande, Florida. He was 84. Again, why are we having to make this political? The man lived a great life, very accomplished. And yet it's always, let's figure out how we can make this obituary political. It says, Mr. Carlson led VOA from 1986 to 1991 as its journalists and commentators chronicled epical events, including the fall of the Berlin Wall, China's deadly crackdown on pro-democracy demonstrators in Tiananmen Square, and the looming breakup of the Soviet Union that marked the end of the Cold War. He later served as ambassador to the Indian Ocean nation of the Seychelles and headed the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which helps support PBS, NPR, and other media outlets. Some GOP lawmakers have long denounced the agency for its cost to taxpayers and perceived left-leaning bias. During his tenure, Mr. Carlson stood against his own party in opposing any cutbacks in funding. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Earlier this month, Trump signed an executive order to dismantle the U.S. Agency for Global Media, which includes VOA, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, the Office of Cuba Broadcasting, and Radio Free Asia. VOA journalists and its current director, Michael Abrowitz, are part of a lawsuit challenging the directive. Mr. Carlson did not publicly comment on Trump's effort to shutter VOA. He was also reticent to offer extensive personal views on the career of his son, a former Fox News host who often displayed strong support for Trump and his policies. This is an obituary, not a political column. Why are we not focusing on his life and his accomplishments, not your Trump derangement syndrome? I want you to understand, if you don't hate the Washington Post, you don't hate them enough. Because this is the crap. They can't help but politicize everything. I mean, if they could politicize classified ads, they would. They just don't exist anymore. This is pathetic. The man lived a storied and accomplished life. He served his country in the Navy, in the Marine Corps. He traveled extensively, great journalist and ambassador. And yet you have to make it about Trump. They can't help themselves. This is how bad our media is. I'm so glad this ties into what Caroline and those guys are doing. We need new voices. You cannot trust these folks anymore. They cannot help themselves.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.